She thought it was a dream, until the billionaire's shirt was still on her bed the next morning. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't check her phone again, but she did. Laura Fraser stared at the blank text message screen for the third time in 10 minutes, her thumb hovering over Dean Norris's contact name. The cursor blinked mockingly at her, as if it knew she was fighting a losing battle with her own curiosity. "Girl, you're doing it again," she whispered to herself, setting the phone face down on her small kitchen table. The morning light filtered through her apartment's sheer curtains, casting warm, golden patterns across the hardwood floors she'd spent months refinishing herself. Everything in her Wicker Park apartment told a story. The vintage leather chair she'd found at a thrift store, the hand-painted accent wall in deep emerald, the plants that somehow thrived despite her chaotic schedule. Laura was 28, with rich mahogany skin that glowed naturally in the morning sun, and hair that she wore in protective styles that changed with her moods, today twisted into an elegant updo with a few curls framing her heart-shaped face. Her dark brown eyes held intelligence and warmth, though lately they also carried the subtle weight of someone who'd learned to guard her heart carefully. She worked as a freelance interior designer, a dream she'd chased despite her family's gentle suggestions about more stable careers. After her last relationship ended 2 years ago, a painful breakup with someone who'd made her feel like she was never quite enough, Laura had thrown herself into her work, creating beautiful spaces for other people while learning to love her own solitude. Her phone buzzed. Not Dean, just her best friend Simone. "Coffee in 20. You sound like you need it in your voice message last night." Laura smiled despite herself. Simone Rodriguez had been her anchor since college, the kind of friend who could read her moods through text messages and always knew when to show up with caffeine and common sense. 20 minutes later, Laura walked into Grind Coffee, a cozy spot on North Avenue where the baristas knew her order by heart. Medium roast with oat milk and a touch of cinnamon. The cafe was her sanctuary. Exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, and the comforting hum of people living their Tuesday morning lives. Simone was already there, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing scrubs from her night shift at Northwestern Memorial. As an ER nurse, Simone had seen enough real drama to have zero patience for manufactured complications. "Okay, spill," Simone said without preamble, as Laura slid into the worn leather booth across from her. "Who's got you checking your phone like a teenager?" Laura wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, inhaling the familiar comfort of roasted beans and steamed milk. "It's not what you think. It's never what I think with you, which is why I'm worried." Simone's brown eyes were kind but direct. "Talk to me. I have this client," Laura began, then paused. "Well, had. The project's almost finished." And nothing. That's the problem." Laura took a sip of her coffee, buying time. "Dean Norris. He owns half the high-end properties in Gold Coast and Streeterville. I've been working on his penthouse for the past 4 months." Simone raised an eyebrow. "The billionaire real estate guy? Laura, please tell me you're not—" "I'm not anything," Laura interrupted, though her cheeks warmed slightly. "It's just, I don't know. He's different than I expected." Different was an understatement. When Laura first met Dean Norris, she'd prepared herself for the typical wealthy client experience, someone who'd treat her like expensive help and change their mind every other day. Instead, she'd found a man who listened carefully to her ideas, asked thoughtful questions about color psychology and spatial flow, and somehow always had her favorite tea waiting when she arrived for their meetings. Dean was 37, tall and lean with the kind of confident posture that came from years of making decisions that mattered. His hair was dark brown with subtle silver threads at the temples, and his green eyes held an intensity that made Laura feel like he was really seeing her when they talked. He dressed impeccably, tailored suits during business hours, perfectly fitted casual wear when they worked evenings, but it was the way he rolled up his sleeves and actually helped move furniture that had surprised her. "Different how?" Simone pressed. Laura traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. "He asks about my family. Remembers that I mentioned my grandmother's recipes. Last week, when I was stressed about another client cancelling, he ordered lunch from this little Ethiopian place because I'd mentioned missing the food from my neighborhood growing up." "Sounds like basic human decency," Simone said, but her tone was gentler now. "You know it's not that simple." Laura's voice dropped. "Men like him, they live in a different world. I finish this job, I get paid, and I never see him again. That's how this works. But you don't want it to work that way. It wasn't a question, and Laura didn't try to deny it. Yesterday we were going over the final details for his home office. He has this view of the lake that's just breathtaking. And he caught me staring out the window, and instead of being impatient, he just stood there with me for like 5 minutes, not saying anything. Then he asked if I ever missed the lake when I was working on other projects. What did you say? That I never really noticed it before working with him. Laura's cheeks flushed, and then he said that he'd never noticed a lot of things before working with me. Simone leaned forward. Laura, I know. It's probably nothing. Rich men say charming things. It's like a skill they learn. But even as she said it, Laura remembered the way Dean's voice had dropped when he'd spoken, how his eyes had lingered on her face like he was memorizing something precious. Or, Simone said carefully, maybe he's just a man who's interested in an incredible woman. Laura's phone buzzed on the table between them. Both women looked down at the screen. Dean Norris. Laura's heart did something acrobatic in her chest. She glanced up at Simone, who was wearing a knowing smile. Answer it, Simone whispered. Laura swiped to open the message, her pulse quickening. The penthouse feels empty without your creative chaos. Any chance you're free this evening? I have a bottle of wine and a sunset that could use your professional opinion. For a moment, Laura forgot how to breathe. This wasn't about work. This was... What does it say? Simone asked. Laura turned the phone around and Simone's smile grew wider. Well, Simone said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. Looks like your Tuesday just got a lot more interesting. Laura stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every practical voice in her head was screaming warnings about professional boundaries and the differences in their worlds. But there was another voice, smaller and braver, whispering that maybe, just maybe, some chances were worth taking. Outside the cafe window, Chicago hummed with its usual energy, but Laura felt like she was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. The question was, did she have the courage to step forward, or would she spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been? Some invitations change everything, even before you answer them. Laura stared at Dean's message for what felt like an eternity, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The cafe buzzed around her with typical Tuesday energy. Students typing furiously on laptops, business people grabbing quick caffeine fixes, the gentle hiss of the espresso machine creating a soundtrack of normalcy. But nothing felt normal about the way her heart was racing. You're overthinking this, Simone said, sliding her empty cup aside and leaning forward. It's just wine and a sunset, with a billionaire in his penthouse, that I've been decorating for 4 months while trying very hard not to notice how he looks at me. Laura set her phone down like it might explode. Simone, what if I'm reading this all wrong? What if he's just being nice? Laura Marie Fraser. Simone used her full name, which meant business. In the 3 years I've known you, I have never, and I mean never, seen you get flustered over a client. You once told Mrs. Henderson from Gold Coast that her taste in art looked like a blind peacock had a tantrum, and you didn't even blink. Despite her nerves, Laura laughed. She wanted to put a neon pink flamingo sculpture next to a Ming Dynasty vase. Exactly. You don't get nervous about work stuff. This isn't work stuff anymore. Simone reached across the table and covered Laura's hand with hers. The question is, do you want it to be something else? Laura looked down at their joined hands. Simone's were small and practical, with short nails and the faint scent of hospital-grade soap that never quite washed away. Laura's were longer, with neat French tips and a small gold ring her grandmother had given her, the one piece of jewelry she never took off. I haven't dated anyone seriously since Stephen, Laura admitted quietly. Stephen Campbell had been her college boyfriend, who'd somehow convinced her that her dreams of being a designer were cute hobbies, and that she should focus on something more realistic. It had taken her 2 years to realize that someone who made her feel small wasn't someone worth keeping. Stephen was an idiot who didn't deserve you then, and he definitely doesn't get to influence your decisions now, Simone said firmly. Besides, when's the last time you had fun? Real fun, not work fun. Laura considered this. Her idea of fun lately had been rearranging her own furniture and binge-watching home renovation shows while eating takeout Thai food, not exactly the lifestyle of a woman embracing her late 20s. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Dean. No pressure if you're busy. I just realized I've spent 4 months learning your professional opinions, but I don't know if you prefer red wine or white. Seems like an oversight worth correcting. Oh, he's good, Simone said, reading over Laura's shoulder. That's smooth without being pushy. I like him already. You don't even know him. I know he pays attention. I know he's patient enough to spend 4 months working with you without being inappropriate. And I know he makes you smile in a way you haven't smiled in ages." Simone tilted her head. "What's the worst that could happen?" Laura could think of several worst-case scenarios, actually. She could make a fool of herself. She could misread the situation entirely. She could fall for someone whose world was so different from hers that it would never work. She could get her heart broken by someone who had the power to do real damage. But as she sat there, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of the coffee shop, another thought occurred to her. What if the worst thing that could happen was spending the rest of her life wondering, what if? "I don't even know what to wear," Laura said, and Simone's face lit up with victory. "Now we're talking. What time is sunset these days?" "Around 7:30. "Perfect. That gives us 4 hours to find you something that says, 'I'm a successful professional who also happens to look amazing in evening light.'" Laura laughed, despite her nerves. "Is that a specific category of clothing?" "It is now. Come on." Simone stood up and gathered her purse. "We're going shopping, and then you're going to text that man back and tell him yes." 2 hours later, Laura stood in her bedroom wearing a soft burgundy wrap dress that Simone had insisted brought out the golden undertones in her skin. It was elegant without being formal, feminine without being overly sexy. She'd left her hair down in loose curls and kept her makeup natural, just enough to enhance her features without looking like she'd tried too hard. Her phone sat on the dresser, Dean's message still unanswered. "You're stalling," she told her reflection, but she picked up the phone anyway. "Red wine, actually, and I've been wondering what your favorite view of the city is. See you at 7:30. She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came back almost immediately. "I have a feeling I'm about to find out. Building entrance is on Lakeshore Drive. Ask for the penthouse. I'll be waiting." Laura's stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and terror. She was really doing this. She was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and for the first time in months that felt like exactly the right thing to do. She grabbed her purse and keys, took one last look in the mirror, and headed for the door. Outside, Chicago was settling into that magical hour when the day shifted toward evening, and the city lights began to compete with the fading sun. As Laura hailed a cab, she thought about what Simone had said about fun. Maybe it was time to remember what that felt like. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe and start living like someone who deserved good things. The cab pulled up to the curb, and Laura slid into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. Laura gave him Dean's address, and as they pulled into traffic, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the thrilling uncertainty of not knowing what came next. The city streamed past the windows in a blur of light and possibility, and for the first time in months, Laura Fraser felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Little did she know that by the time the sun set, everything she thought she knew about her carefully controlled life would be turned completely upside down. The elevator ride to the top felt like ascending to another world. Laura's reflection stared back at her from the polished steel doors of the private elevator, and she barely recognized the woman looking back. There was something different in her eyes, a spark of anticipation that had been missing for longer than she cared to admit. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed 38 floors, carrying her away from her familiar world and towards something completely unknown. The building's lobby had been all marble and understated luxury, the kind of place where even the security guards wore tailored suits. When she'd given her name, the concierge had smiled like he'd been expecting her, which somehow made her feel both special and slightly out of place. Ding. The elevator doors opened directly into Dean's penthouse, and Laura's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen the space dozens of times over the past 4 months, had chosen every piece of furniture and every paint color, but somehow it looked entirely different now. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in golden light that made her careful color choices seem to glow from within. Laura. She turned toward the sound of her name and found Dean standing near the kitchen island, holding 2 wine glasses and wearing an expression she'd never seen before. Gone was the polished businessman in the expensive suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his green eyes look almost emerald. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd been running his hands through it, and when he smiled, Laura felt her carefully constructed composure wobble dangerously. "Tao came," he said, and there was something almost surprised in his voice, like he hadn't quite believed she would. "You doubted me," Laura asked, stepping into the space and letting her purse drop onto the entryway table she'd selected weeks ago. It felt surreal to be here as a guest rather than a designer, to see the apartment as a home rather than a project. I doubted myself, Dean admitted, moving toward her with the wine glasses. I've been staring at that message for 20 minutes, wondering if I completely misread the situation. Laura accepted the glass of deep red wine, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The touch sent a small electric shock up her arm, and from the way Dean's eyes flickered, she wasn't the only one who felt it. What situation would that be? She asked, taking a sip of the wine. It was smooth and rich, with hints of dark cherry, and something she couldn't quite identify. Definitely not the $15 bottles she usually bought at the grocery store. Dean set his own glass down and leaned against the kitchen island, studying her face. The one where I've spent 4 months trying to be professional while secretly looking forward to your visits more than anything else in my week. The honesty in his voice made Laura's heart skip. She'd spent so much time convincing herself that the lingering looks and easy conversations were just her imagination, but here he was, confirming that she hadn't been reading too much into things after all. I thought it was just me, she said softly. Definitely not just you. Dean's smile was warm and slightly crooked, and Laura realized she'd never seen him look so relaxed. Although I have to admit, inviting you here tonight was either the best idea I've had in months, or the worst. Why the worst? Because now that you're here, I'm not sure I'll be able to pretend this is just about business anymore. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Laura took another sip of wine, buying herself a moment to think. She could feel herself standing at the edge of something significant, and every instinct told her to be careful, to protect herself, to maintain the safe distance she'd worked so hard to create. But then Dean moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine that made her want to lean into him. "Come on," he said, offering her his hand. "I want to show you something." Laura hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. His fingers were warm and strong, and when they closed around hers, she felt a sense of rightness that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. He led her through the living room, past the deep blue sectional sofa she'd chosen, the abstract paintings she'd hung, the carefully arranged books and objects that made the space feel lived in rather than sterile. But instead of stopping at the main windows, he guided her toward a door she'd helped him design but had never seen opened. "I had them finished this last week," Dean said, pushing open the door to reveal a private rooftop terrace. Laura gasped. The space was stunning. Intimate seating areas arranged around a sleek fire pit, ambient lighting that created pools of warm illumination, and plantings that softened the urban edges. But it was the view that took her breath away. Chicago stretched out in every direction, the lake glittering in the distance, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk approached. "Dean, this is—" She trailed off, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I wanted a space that felt like yours," he said quietly. "Everything you designed inside was so thoughtful, so warm. I thought you might appreciate having a piece of the sky to go with it." Laura felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. In all her years of design work, no client had ever done something so personal, so clearly meant just for her. "You built this for me? I built it hoping you'd want to share it with me." The vulnerability in his voice made her turn to look at him fully. Dean Norris, who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals, was standing there looking uncertain and hopeful, waiting for her response. "It's perfect," she whispered. Relief flooded his features, and he moved to the seating area, patting the cushion beside him. "The sun should start setting in about 20 minutes. I've been told it's quite a show from up here." Laura settled beside him, hyper-aware of the warmth radiating from his body and the way the evening breeze carried his scent toward her. The wine was making her feel loose and brave, and when Dean shifted closer, she didn't move away. "Can I ask you something?" she said, watching the way the city lights were beginning to compete with the fading daylight. "Anything. What changed your mind? About keeping things professional, I mean." Dean was quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with the stem of his wine glass. "Last Tuesday," he said finally, "when you were standing at the window in my office and you got this look on your face like you were seeing something beautiful. And I realized I spent more time looking at you than I did at anything else in that room." Laura's breath caught. "Dean, I know this is complicated," he continued, turning to face her fully. "I know there are a dozen reasons why this might not work, but I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in, well, maybe ever." The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that rivaled any sunset Laura had ever seen. But she found herself looking at Dean instead, at the way the golden light played across his features and made his eyes look warm and sincere. And in that moment, she realized that all her careful walls were about to come tumbling down. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in the spaces between words. The sunset painted Chicago in shades of amber and rose, but Laura found herself studying Dean's profile instead of the spectacular view. The golden light softened his features, making him look younger somehow, more approachable than the polished businessman she'd grown accustomed to seeing across conference tables. "You're missing it," Dean said softly, not turning away from the horizon but clearly aware of her gaze. "No, I'm not," Laura replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm just enjoying a different view." Dean turned then, and the look in his eyes made her heart stutter. There was something raw there, unguarded in a way she'd never seen before. "Laura, I need you to know something." "What's that?" "I've never done this before." He gestured vaguely between them. "This, whatever this is. I don't usually blur the lines." Laura shifted on the plush outdoor cushions to face him more fully. "What makes me different?" "Everything." The word came out like a confession. "The way you laugh when you think no one's listening. How you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating. The fact that you told Mrs. Williams from the furniture showroom that her attitude was more sour than a bag of lemons, and then somehow convinced her to give us a 20% discount." Laura laughed, remembering that particular afternoon. She respected the honesty. "You have this way of being completely yourself no matter who's in the room. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Dean's voice dropped lower. "In my world, everyone's performing all the time. But you're just genuinely you." The sincerity in his voice made Laura's chest tight with emotion. "You don't know me as well as you think you do." "Then tell me." Dean set his wineglass aside and shifted closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Tell me something real." Laura hesitated. Sharing pieces of herself had never come easily, especially with someone whose world felt so different from her own. But there was something about the way Dean was looking at her, patient and encouraging, that made her want to try. "I used to be afraid of heights," she said finally. Dean's eyebrows rose slightly. "Used to be. My grandmother lived in a fourth-floor walk-up in Bronzeville, no elevator. When I was little, I was terrified to look out her windows, convinced I'd somehow fall through the glass." Laura smiled at the memory. "She used to make me hot chocolate and sit with me by those windows every Sunday after church, telling me stories about the people we could see walking below. Said fear was just excitement wearing a disguise." Smart woman. The smartest. She taught me that beautiful things are usually worth the risk of getting to them. Laura met his eyes. "That's why I became a designer. I wanted to create spaces that felt safe enough for people to be brave in." Dean was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "Is that what you're doing now, being brave?" "Terrifyingly so." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terrace. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with its evening energy, but up here it felt like they were suspended above all of it, existing in their own private world. "My turn?" Dean asked. Laura nodded, settling back against the cushions with her wine, giving him her full attention. "I built my first fort when I was 8, Dean began, his voice taking on a distant quality. "My parents had just gotten divorced, and I was living with my dad in this massive house that felt empty all the time. So I took every sheet and blanket I could find and built this elaborate tent city in the living room. What happened? Dad came home from a business trip and lost his mind. Said I was making a mess, that I needed to act like a young gentleman, not a wild animal." Dean's jaw tightened slightly. "He made me tear it all down and never build anything like it again." Laura felt her heart ache for the 8-year-old boy who just wanted to create something that felt like home. "I'm sorry. I tell you that because this—" He gestured around the terrace, then at the space between them. "This feels like the first fort I've built since then. The first time I've created something just because it made me happy, not because it was practical or profitable." The vulnerability in his admission made Laura want to reach out and touch him, to somehow comfort the child he'd been and the man he was now. "Dean, I know it sounds crazy. A 37-year-old man comparing a relationship to a blanket fort. It doesn't sound crazy," Laura said firmly. "It sounds honest." The sun touched the horizon now, sending ribbons of orange and pink across the sky. The automatic lighting on the terrace began to glow softly, creating an intimate cocoon of warmth around them. "Can I ask you something?" Dean said. "Anything. When you were choosing colors for the living room, you kept holding up these paint samples to the light, checking how they looked at different times of day. What were you looking for? Laura smiled, touched that he'd noticed such a small detail. The moment when a color transforms. Most people choose paint based on how it looks in the store, but every color has a personality that changes with the light. I was looking for the shades that would make you feel at home, not just at noon, but also at sunset, and on gray mornings, and late at night when you're tired and need comfort. You were thinking about my comfort at night? The question was asked lightly, but there was something underneath it that made Laura's pulse quicken. I was thinking about you being happy in your space, all the time. I am happy, Dean said quietly, especially right now. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Laura could feel herself leaning closer without conscious thought, drawn by the warmth in his eyes and the magnetic pull she'd been fighting for months. Laura, Dean said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes? I'm going to kiss you now. If that's not okay, you need to tell me. Laura's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational part of her brain was screaming warnings about complications and consequences, but her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Beautiful things are usually worth the risk of getting to them. It's okay, she whispered back. Dean's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing gently across her skin. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of the decision hanging between them. And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative as if he was giving her time to change her mind. But when Laura's hand fisted in his sweater and she kissed him back, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate, like they were both drowning and had just found air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Laura felt like the world had tilted on its axis. That was, she began. Yeah, Dean agreed, resting his forehead against hers. It was. The sun had set completely now, leaving them bathed in the soft glow of the terrace lights and the glittering backdrop of Chicago's evening skyline, and Laura realized that no matter what happened next, there was no going back to the way things were before. The space between one breath and the next can hold a lifetime of possibilities. Laura couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this dizzy from a kiss. She and Dean sat there on the terrace, foreheads still touching, sharing the same air while the city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds. Her hand was still fisted in his sweater, and she could feel his heartbeat racing beneath her knuckles. We should probably talk about this, Dean said softly, though he made no move to pull away. Probably, Laura agreed, but instead of talking she found herself studying the way the terrace lights cast shadows across his face, making him look mysterious and somehow more real at the same time. Laura, there was something in the way he said her name that made her look up and meet his eyes. I need you to know that I don't take this lightly. What just happened, what's been building between us for months, it means something to me. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. It means something to me too. Good. Dean's thumb traced across her cheek again, and Laura found herself leaning into the touch. Because I'd like to ask you to stay for dinner. Nothing fancy. I make a mean grilled cheese sandwich, and I have a feeling you haven't eaten anything since that coffee this morning. Laura's stomach chose that exact moment to growl audibly, making them both laugh. How did you know? Because I've watched you work for 4 months. When you're focused on a project, you forget about everything else, including food. Dean stood and offered her his hand. Come on, let me take care of you for once. The phrase sent a warm shiver through Laura. When was the last time someone had wanted to take care of her? Stephen certainly never had. He'd been more interested in her taking care of him, but there was something different in the way Dean said it, something that made her feel cherished rather than diminished. She let him pull her to her feet, and they made their way back into the penthouse. The space looked different in the evening light, cozier somehow. The warm glow from the carefully placed lamps she'd selected created pools of golden light that made everything feel intimate and inviting. Dean guided her to the kitchen island while he moved around the space with surprising competence. Laura perched on one of the bar stools, watching as he pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. You know, when I was choosing appliances for this kitchen, I wasn't sure you'd ever actually use them, Laura said, accepting the fresh glass of wine he poured for her. What did you think I lived on? Takeout and protein bars? Pretty much, yeah, Laura grinned. Most of my clients treat their kitchens like expensive art installations. Dean laughed, pulling out a well-seasoned cast-iron pan. My housekeeper, Mrs. Kowalski, would have strong words for anyone who didn't properly use a kitchen. She taught me to cook when I was 12, said no man should go through life unable to feed himself properly. Smart woman. The smartest. She still comes by once a week, mostly to make sure I'm eating vegetables and to tell me my apartment looks too sterile. Dean glanced around the space. Although she's been suspiciously quiet about that lately. Maybe because it doesn't look sterile anymore? Maybe because she knows I've been happier lately. Dean's eyes found hers across the kitchen island. She asked me last week if I was seeing someone. I told her no, but I think she knew I was lying. Why were you lying? Dean was quiet for a moment, focusing on buttering bread with more attention than the task required. Because I wasn't sure what we were doing. I'm still not, actually. Laura set down her wine glass, suddenly feeling the need to be completely honest. Dean, I have to tell you something. He looked up, and she could see a flicker of worry cross his features. I'm scared, she admitted. This whole thing terrifies me. Not just because you're, well, you, but because I haven't felt this way about anyone in a really long time, and I'm not sure I remember how to do this without getting hurt. Dean set down the butter knife and moved around the island until he was standing in front of her. Can I tell you something? Laura nodded. I'm scared too. I haven't had a real relationship in 3 years, and that one ended because she told me I was emotionally unavailable and married to my work. Dean's hands came to rest on the counter on either side of her, not trapping her, but creating a sense of intimacy. She wasn't wrong. What's different now? You. The word was simple, but the weight behind it made Laura's breath catch. With you, I don't want to check my phone during dinner. I don't want to cut conversations short for conference calls. I want to know what makes you laugh and what keeps you awake at night, and whether you sing in the shower. Do you want the answer to that last one? Always. Laura felt herself blushing. Sometimes, when I think no one can hear me. Dean's smile was soft and completely captivated. What do you sing? Old R&B mostly. My grandmother's favorites. Aretha Franklin, Etta James, Nina Simone. Laura found herself relaxing as she talked. She used to say that music was the fastest way to understand someone's soul. What would your soul say right now? The question was asked so quietly that Laura almost didn't hear it over the gentle sizzle of butter in the pan behind him. She thought about it for a moment, considering how to put into words the swirl of emotions coursing through her. That I'm tired of being careful, she said finally. That maybe it's time to trust someone again. Dean's eyes darkened with something that looked like relief and hunger combined. Laura, yes? Would it be okay if I kissed you again? Instead of answering, Laura slid her hands up his chest and pulled him down to her. This kiss was different from the first, less tentative, more certain. When Dean's hands settled on her waist, Laura felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to sunlight. They were interrupted by the sharp smell of burning butter. Shit, Dean muttered against her lips, pulling away to rescue their dinner. Laura laughed, feeling giddy and light in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Very smooth, Chef. I'm blaming you for being distractingly beautiful, Dean said, scraping the burnt butter out of the pan with good-natured efficiency. Is that your standard excuse when you mess up dinner? I've never messed up dinner for someone I was trying to impress before. The admission was casual, but it made Laura's heart skip. You're trying to impress me. Dean looked up from the stove, his expression suddenly serious. Laura, I've been trying to impress you since the day you told me my color choices looked like a beige fever dream, and then showed me what a real home could look like. She remembered that day, their third meeting, when she'd finally gotten frustrated enough with his safe corporate aesthetic to speak her mind. She'd been sure he'd fire her on the spot. You weren't offended. I was fascinated. No one had ever been that honest with me before. Dean started the sandwich over, this time keeping his attention firmly on the pan. That was the day I realized I was in trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind where I started rearranging my schedule so I'd be here for every one of your visits. The kind where I found myself buying coffee I knew you'd like and keeping it in the cupboard just in case. The kind where I started looking forward to Monday mornings because they meant I might see you. Laura felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the wine. Dean Norris, are you telling me you've had a crush on me for months? I'm telling you that what I feel for you stopped being a crush somewhere around the time you spent 20 minutes explaining why the living room needed layers of light, and I realized I could listen to you talk about anything for hours. The grilled cheese was perfect this time, golden brown and perfectly melted. Dean plated it alongside some fruit and fancy crackers, creating a meal that was somehow both simple and elegant. They ate at the kitchen island, talking easily about everything and nothing. Laura found herself sharing stories about her family, her grandmother's recipes, the little apartment she'd slowly transformed into her sanctuary. Dean told her about his travels, his work, the satisfaction he found in creating something lasting in a city that was constantly changing. "Can I ask you something personal?" Laura said as they finished eating. "Haven't we moved past the point of asking permission for personal questions?" Laura smiled. "Fair point. Why haven't you been in a relationship for 3 years?" Dean was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Honestly, because I thought I didn't have time for love. I convinced myself that work was enough, that success was enough. And then I met you, and suddenly I realized I'd been starving without even knowing it." The honesty in his voice took Laura's breath away. She reached across the small space between them and took his hand. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I think you're worth the risk." Dean's fingers tightened around hers. "Laura Fraser, you're going to completely ruin me, aren't you?" "I certainly hope so." And as the night deepened around them, Laura realized that maybe getting ruined was exactly what they both needed. Some nights rewrite the story of your entire life. The conversation had flowed as easily as the wine, carrying them from the kitchen to the living room where they now sat, curled together on the deep blue sectional Laura had chosen months ago. Outside, Chicago had settled into its nighttime rhythm, but inside the penthouse, time seemed suspended in amber light and whispered confessions. Laura had kicked off her heels hours ago and tucked her feet beneath her, feeling more relaxed than she had in months. Dean sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, one arm draped along the back of the sofa behind her. "Tell me something nobody else knows about you," Dean said, his voice soft in the intimate lighting. Laura considered this, swirling the last of her wine in her glass. "I talk to my plants." "That's not exactly shocking. Lots of people talk to their plants." "I mean really talk to them, full conversations. I tell them about my day, ask for their advice, apologize when I forget to water them." Laura felt her cheeks warm. "My ficus tree, Ferdinand, is an excellent listener, very non-judgmental." Dean's laugh was warm and genuine. "Ferdinand? He has personality. You can't just call a plant with personality plant." Laura nudged him with her shoulder. "Your turn. Secret confession." Dean was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently playing with a curl that had escaped from Laura's updo. "I keep a journal. That's actually really sweet." "It's not sweet. It's pathetic. I write in it every night before bed, like some teenage girl with a crush." Dean's voice took on a self-deprecating tone. "Thoughts about the day, things I want to remember, problems I'm trying to work through." "What did you write about tonight?" The question slipped out before Laura could stop herself, and she immediately felt her face heat. "Sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's—" Dean shifted to face her more fully. "I was going to write about you, about how you looked when you first walked into the penthouse tonight, like you were seeing it with new eyes. About the way you laugh when you're truly happy, not polite social laughter, but the real thing that makes your whole face light up." Laura's breath caught. "Dean, about how I've been falling for you for months, and tonight was the first time I was brave enough to do something about it." The honesty in his voice made Laura's heart race. She set her wine glass on the coffee table with hands that weren't quite steady. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm completely gone over you, Laura Fraser. I'm saying that I don't want this night to end because I'm terrified that when morning comes, you'll decide this was all a mistake." Laura turned to face him fully, studying his expression in the soft lamplight. Dean Norris, who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals, looked vulnerable and uncertain, waiting for her response. "It's not a mistake," she said quietly. Relief flooded his features. "No?" "No." Laura reached up to trace the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "It's terrifying and complicated, and probably the most reckless thing I've done in years, but it's not a mistake." Dean caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Laura, I need you to know something else." "What?" "I don't want to rush this. Whatever this is between us, I want to do it right. I want to take you on proper dates, meet your friends, learn what makes you happy." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "I want to earn this." The sweetness of the statement made Laura's chest tight with emotion. Stephen had never wanted to earn anything. He'd expected her devotion as his due. But Dean was different. Dean saw her as something precious worth working for. "What if I don't want to wait?" Laura asked, surprised by her own boldness. Dean's eyes darkened. "Laura, I'm not talking about rushing into anything serious," she clarified quickly. "I'm talking about not overthinking this. About letting myself feel something good for once without analyzing it to death." Dean was quiet for a long moment, searching her face. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Laura shifted closer until she was close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "I'm sure that I've spent 2 years building walls around my heart, and tonight is the first time I've wanted to tear them down. Laura, her name was barely a whisper on his lips. I'm sure that I trust you, she continued, and I'm sure that if I don't kiss you again right now, I'm going to lose my nerve entirely. Dean's hand came up to cup her face. We can't lose that. This time when he kissed her, there was nothing tentative about it. It was deep and hungry and full of months of suppressed longing. Laura felt herself melting into him, her hands fisting in his sweater as he pulled her closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dean rested his forehead against hers. Laura, if we do this, if we cross this line tonight, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, Laura whispered. I want to go forward, with you. The next few hours passed in a haze of whispered conversations and gentle touches. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of themselves they'd never shown anyone else. Dean told her about the loneliness of growing up wealthy, but emotionally distant from his family. Laura shared stories about her grandmother's wisdom and the way her family had rallied around her when Stephen had tried to make her feel small. Somewhere around midnight, as they lay tangled together on the sofa, Laura realized that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just attraction anymore, or even a crush. This was the beginning of something real and profound, and completely terrifying. I should probably go home, Laura murmured against Dean's chest, though she made no move to leave the warmth of his arms. Probably, Dean agreed, his hand stroking slowly through her hair. But there's a storm moving in. You should wait until it passes. As if summoned by his words, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows. How convenient, Laura said, smiling against his shirt. I may have checked the weather forecast earlier, Dean admitted. Dean Norris, did you plan this? I planned to make you dinner and hope you'd want to stay for conversation. The rest, he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. The rest is just us being brave enough to see where this goes. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling around the building. Laura felt safe and warm in Dean's arms, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. Laura? Dean's voice was soft in the darkness. Stay with me tonight. Not because of the storm, but because I don't want to let you go yet. Laura lifted her head to look at him, seeing nothing but sincerity and hope in his expression. Okay. Laura settled back against his chest, feeling more at peace than she had in years. But I'm borrowing one of your shirts to sleep in. Dean's laugh rumbled through his chest. Deal. Outside, the storm raged against the glass, but inside, wrapped in Dean's arms, Laura felt like she was exactly where she belonged. And as sleep began to claim them both, neither realized that by morning, everything would change in ways they never could have anticipated. The cruelest truth about perfect nights is that they always end with morning. Laura woke to the soft whisper of silk curtains stirring in a gentle breeze and the unfamiliar sensation of Egyptian cotton sheets against her skin. For a moment, she floated in that hazy space between sleep and consciousness, wrapped in warmth and the lingering scent of Dean's cologne on the pillow beside her. The events of the night before came back in waves of sensation and emotion. The sunset on the terrace, the kiss that had changed everything, hours of conversation that had felt like coming home, the storm that had given them an excuse to do what they both wanted anyway, stay wrapped in each other's arms until dawn. Laura smiled, stretching languidly in the enormous bed, and reached for the space where Dean should have been. Her hand met only cool sheets and an indent in the pillow that suggested he'd been gone for a while. Dean, she called softly, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. The penthouse was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of Chicago waking up 38 floors below. She glanced at the nightstand where her phone showed 8:47 a.m. Not unreasonably late, but late enough that Dean might have already left for work. Except it was Saturday, wasn't it? Laura's mind felt fuzzy with sleep and the remnants of last night's wine. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and she could see into the main living area. No movement, no sounds of someone making coffee or moving around the kitchen. The apartment felt empty in a way that made her stomach clench with unease. Don't overthink this, Laura whispered to herself, borrowing Simone's favorite phrase. He probably went to get coffee or bagels, or he's in his office taking a call. But even as she tried to rationalize his absence, a cold finger of doubt traced down her spine. Stephen used to disappear after intimate moments too, claiming he needed space to think or had suddenly remembered urgent errands. Laura had learned to read the signs of regret in a man's behavior, and the empty apartment was setting off every alarm bell she'd spent 2 years learning to trust. She slipped out of bed, acutely aware that she was wearing Dean's white dress shirt from the night before, the one he'd given her when she'd said she needed something to sleep in. It fell to mid-thigh on her smaller frame, the sleeves rolled up multiple times, and it still carried his scent. Looking down at herself, Laura felt exposed and foolish in a way that made her chest tight. A quick search of the penthouse confirmed what she already knew. Dean was gone. No note on the kitchen counter where they'd shared grilled cheese and confessions. No message propped against the coffee maker. No text on her phone explaining where he'd gone or when he'd be back. Just silence and the ghost of his presence in every carefully designed corner of the space. Laura made her way to the terrace doors, hoping to find him outside with his morning coffee. But the space was empty, except for a light coating of rainwater from the storm and 2 wine glasses sitting exactly where they'd left them the night before. The sight of them, abandoned and somehow lonely in the morning light, made her throat constrict. "This is fine," she said aloud, though her voice sounded shaky even to her own ears. "People leave in the morning. People have things to do. This doesn't mean anything." But it felt like something. It felt like the universe playing a cruel joke, giving her one perfect night only to snatch it away with the harsh light of morning. It felt like every fear she'd voiced to Dean the night before, about getting hurt, about not knowing how to trust again, coming true in the most painful way possible. Laura returned to the bedroom and began gathering her clothes from the night before, trying to ignore the way her hands were shaking. The burgundy dress that had made her feel beautiful and confident now seemed like costume she'd worn to play a role she had no business playing. The heels that Simone had insisted made her legs look amazing felt like props from someone else's life. As she reached for her purse on the dresser, her reflection caught her eye in the mirror above it. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd spent the night with a man who'd disappeared before she woke up. Her hair was tousled, her makeup smudged beneath her eyes, and Dean's shirt hung on her like evidence of her poor judgment. "Stupid," she whispered to her reflection. "So stupid to think this was different." She started to unbutton the shirt, intending to leave it neatly folded on the bed, but stopped when her fingers found something in the chest pocket. A small piece of paper, folded carefully and tucked away like a secret. Laura's heart hammered as she unfolded it, hope and dread warring in her chest. Maybe this was his note. Maybe he'd left her a message after all, something to explain his absence and reassure her that last night had meant what she thought it meant. The note was in Dean's careful handwriting, but it wasn't addressed to her. Instead, it looked like a reminder he'd written to himself. "Johnson meeting moved to 9 a.m. Saturday. Don't forget to call Mom about Dad's birthday. Pick up dry cleaning. Cancel weekend plans." The last line hit Laura like a physical blow. Cancel weekend plans. Written in the same careful script as everything else, but somehow more devastating than if he'd left her a Dear John letter. Because this wasn't even about her. This was Dean's regular life, his normal routine, and she was just something that needed to be cancelled to make room for it. Laura sank onto the edge of the bed, the note crumpling in her fist. She felt foolish and small, and exactly like the woman Stephen had made her believe she was, someone who read too much into kind gestures and mistook sexual attraction for something deeper. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and for a moment her heart leaped. Dean. It had to be Dean, calling to explain, to tell her he'd had to run out for something important, but that he was thinking about her. But the screen showed Simone's name, and Laura's brief surge of hope crashed back into disappointment. "Hey, girl." Simone's voice was bright and curious. "How was last night? Did you have fun with your mysterious billionaire?" Laura opened her mouth to respond, and found that no words would come. How could she explain that she'd had the most perfect night of her life followed by the most humiliating morning? How could she admit that she'd been stupid enough to believe that Dean Norris could actually want something real with someone like her? "Laura, you there?" "I'm here," Laura managed, though her voice sounded strange and distant. It was good. Just good? That doesn't sound like someone who spent the night getting swept off her feet. Laura closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten. "Simone, I think I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "Laura, what happened?" "I stayed," Laura whispered. "I stayed the night and I thought, God, I'm so stupid. I thought it meant something. Where is he now?" "Gone. Just gone. No note, no explanation, nothing." Laura's voice cracked. "And I found this reminder he wrote to himself about cancelling weekend plans. I was just another item on his to-do list that needed to be crossed off." "Oh, honey." Simone's voice was soft with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come get you?" Laura looked around the penthouse one more time, at all the beautiful things she'd chosen and arranged to make this place feel like home. Now it just felt like a museum of her own poor judgment. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I need to get out of here." As she waited for Simone, Laura changed back into her dress and heels, folding Dean's shirt carefully and leaving it on the bed. She took one last look around the space that had felt so magical the night before, trying to memorize the way the morning light played across the surfaces she'd spent months perfecting. But all she could think about was how differently everything looked when you were seeing it alone. The hardest lessons in love are learned in the spaces between hope and heartbreak. Laura spent the next week moving through her life like a ghost of herself. She threw herself into work with the kind of desperate focus that her friends recognized as a coping mechanism, taking on 3 new client consultations and reorganizing her entire apartment twice. But no amount of busy work could quiet the voice in her head that kept replaying every moment of that night, searching for signs she'd missed. Wednesday afternoon found her in her favorite corner booth at Grind Coffee, laptop open and color swatches spread across the table, trying to concentrate on a mood board for a new client. The familiar sounds of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle murmur of conversation, the jazz playlist that always made her feel centered, should have been comforting. Instead, everything felt muted and distant, like she was experiencing life through thick glass. "You look like someone stole your puppy and then kicked it," Simone said, sliding into the booth across from her with 2 oversized mugs of coffee. "I don't have a puppy," Laura replied, without looking up from her laptop screen. "It's a metaphor, genius. You've been moping for a week." Simone pushed one of the mugs toward her. "Extra shot? Oat milk? Cinnamon? Your comfort order." Laura finally looked up, taking in her friend's concerned expression. Simone was still in scrubs from her shift, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she had that look she got when she was preparing to deliver tough love. "I'm not moping. I'm working." "You're hiding." Simone leaned back in the booth, studying Laura's face. "When's the last time you washed your hair? And don't say yesterday because I can see the dry shampoo build up from here." Despite herself, Laura's hand moved self-consciously to her hair, which she'd twisted into a low bun to hide the fact that it desperately needed washing. "I've been busy. You've been wallowing. There's a difference." Simone's voice was gentle but firm. "Laura, honey, I know you're hurt, but you can't let one disappointing morning undo all the progress you've made." "What progress?" Laura laughed bitterly. "The progress where I learned to trust again? The progress where I opened my heart to someone who saw me as a weekend plan to be cancelled? The progress where you remembered that you're worth fighting for," Simone said quietly, "even if he's too stupid to realize it." Laura stared down at her untouched coffee, watching the foam art slowly dissolve into nothing. "I just feel so foolish. I actually thought, God, I thought he was different. Maybe he is different. Maybe there's an explanation." "Simone, he's been gone for a week. No call, no text, nothing. If there was an explanation, don't you think I would have heard it by now?" Before Simone could respond, Laura's phone buzzed against the table. Both women looked down at the screen, and Laura's heart stopped. Dean Norris. "Answer it," Simone whispered urgently. Laura stared at the phone like it might explode. After 7 days of silence, now he was calling. Her finger hovered over the screen as the phone continued to buzz. "Laura, answer the damn phone." On the 4th ring, Laura swiped to accept the call, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello? Laura?" Dean's voice sounded strained, tired in a way she'd never heard before. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you." "Trying to reach me?" Laura's voice came out sharper than she intended. "This is the first call I've gotten from you in a week." I know. Laura, I can explain everything. Where are you? Can we meet?" Laura looked across the table at Simone, who was making encouraging gestures. I'm busy. Please. I know how this looks. I know you must think." "Laura, I had to leave town unexpectedly. My father had a heart attack Sunday morning. I've been at the hospital in Boston all week." The words hit Laura like a physical blow. She felt the anger and hurt that had been sustaining her for 7 days suddenly drain away, replaced by a confusing mix of relief and guilt. Is he okay?" "He's stable now. The surgery went well, but it was touch and go for a few days." Dean's voice cracked slightly. "Laura, I wanted to call you, but everything happened so fast. And then, when I finally had a moment to breathe, I realized I didn't have your number programmed into my phone. I had it in my work contacts, but I couldn't access them from the hospital." Laura closed her eyes, feeling simultaneously relieved and frustrated. "Dean, I know I should have found a way to reach you sooner. I know how it must have looked when you woke up and I was gone. I've been going crazy thinking about what you must have thought." "I thought you regretted it," Laura admitted quietly. "I thought I was just another mistake you needed to clean up." "Never." The word was fierce, immediate. "Laura, that night with you it was the most real I've felt in years. Leaving you was the last thing I wanted to do." Laura felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Across the table, Simone was leaning forward, trying to catch every word of the conversation. "Where are you now?" Laura asked. "I just landed at O'Hare. Laura, I need to see you. Can you meet me? Please?" Laura looked around the coffee shop at the normal Tuesday afternoon crowd going about their lives and realized that nothing about her own life felt normal anymore. Everything had shifted the night she'd decided to be brave enough to stay with Dean, and his absence had only confirmed how much he'd already become a part of her world. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? Yes. Where do you want to meet?" "The penthouse. I know it might be difficult to go back there, but I need to show you something. I need you to understand." Laura's stomach clenched at the thought of returning to the scene of her most humiliating morning, but there was something in Dean's voice, a vulnerability she recognized, that made her agree. "I'll be there in an hour." "Laura, thank you for answering, for giving me a chance to explain." After she hung up, Laura sat staring at her phone while Simone waited with barely contained curiosity. "Well?" Simone finally demanded. "His father had a heart attack. He's been at the hospital in Boston all week." "Holy shit." Simone's expression immediately shifted from curiosity to sympathy. "Is his dad okay?" "He said the surgery went well." Laura rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. "God, Simone, I feel terrible. All week I've been thinking the worst of him, and he was dealing with a family emergency." "Hey, you didn't know. He could have found a way to contact you if he'd really wanted to. He said he didn't have my number with him." "That it was in his work contacts and he couldn't access them from the hospital." Simone raised an eyebrow. "In this day and age?" "Laura, everyone's phone numbers are backed up to the cloud. You can access them from anywhere." The doubt in Simone's voice made Laura's stomach twist. She wanted to believe Dean's explanation, wanted to accept that there were legitimate reasons for his disappearance. But Simone was right. In an age of smartphones and cloud storage, not being able to access a phone number seemed like a weak excuse. "Maybe I'm overthinking this," Laura said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Maybe. Or maybe you're finally learning to trust your instincts." Simone reached across the table and squeezed Laura's hand. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt again." An hour later, Laura stood outside Dean's building, staring up at the glass and steel facade that had seemed so welcoming a week ago. Now it felt imposing, like a monument to her own poor judgment. But she'd come this far, and she owed it to herself and to Dean to hear his full explanation. The same concierge from the week before greeted her with a professional smile, but Laura thought she detected a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Did he know? Did the whole building staff know that she was the woman who'd spent one night and been discarded by morning? The elevator ride to the penthouse felt endless, each floor bringing her closer to answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. When the doors opened directly into Dean's apartment, she found him waiting for her, and her breath caught at the sight of him. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, and his clothes, a rumpled button-down and dark jeans, looked like he'd been wearing them for days. This wasn't the polished businessman she was used to seeing. This was a man who'd been through something difficult and consuming. "Laura," he moved toward her immediately, and she could see the relief in his expression. "Thank you for coming. How's your father?" she asked, staying near the elevator doors. "Better. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, but it's going to be a long road." Dean ran a hand through his hair. "Laura, I need to show you something. I need you to understand why I couldn't call." He led her to the kitchen island, where his phone was plugged in and charging. The screen was completely black, and when he pressed the power button, nothing happened. "It died Sunday morning, right after I got the call about Dad. I grabbed it and my wallet and ran for the airport. I didn't think to grab the charger, and when I got to Boston, nothing was open, and I was too focused on Dad to think about anything else." Laura stared at the dead phone, wanting to believe, but still feeling uncertain. "Dean, you could have called me from the hospital, or had someone else call." "I could have," he agreed, "and I should have. But honestly, Laura, I wasn't thinking clearly. My dad almost died. I've been sleeping in hospital chairs and living on vending machine coffee, and..." He stopped, looking directly at her. That's not an excuse, that's just the truth. And looking into his eyes, Laura realized she had a choice. She could let fear and past hurt dictate her response, or she could choose to trust the man who was standing before her, raw and honest and asking for understanding. Sometimes the deepest truths are found in the smallest gestures. Laura stared at Dean's dead phone for a long moment, her heart warring with her head. Every logical part of her wanted to accept his explanation, to let relief wash away the week of hurt and doubt. But Stephen's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her of all the times she'd made excuses for men who didn't deserve them. "Laura," Dean said softly, setting the phone aside, "I know this is hard to believe. I know I've given you every reason to doubt me. Have you?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Because a week ago you made me feel like I was the most important person in your world, and then I woke up alone with a note about cancelling weekend plans." Dean's face went pale. "What note?" "The one in your shirt pocket. Your reminder to cancel weekend plans." Laura's voice cracked slightly. "I found it when I was getting dressed, and I thought I was just another item on your to-do list that needed to be crossed off." "Oh, God." Dean moved toward her, then stopped himself when he saw her step back. "Laura, that note wasn't about you. Those were plans I'd made with my business partner for a golf weekend. I was going to cancel them so I could spend the weekend with you." Laura felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "What?" "I wrote that note Friday afternoon before our dinner. I was planning to call him Saturday morning and tell him I had something more important to do." Dean's eyes were earnest, desperate. "Laura, you weren't the plan I was cancelling. You were the reason I was cancelling everything else." The words hit Laura like a physical blow, and she sank onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. All week, she'd been building her hurt around the foundation of that note, and now Dean was telling her she'd read it completely wrong. "How was I supposed to know that?" she whispered. "You weren't. God, Laura, you weren't supposed to wake up alone at all. I was supposed to be there to make you coffee and tell you how beautiful you looked in my shirt and ask if you wanted to spend the day together." Dean's voice was rough with emotion. "Instead, you woke up to an empty apartment and a note that made you think I regretted the most perfect night of my life." Laura looked up at him, seeing the exhaustion and pain etched in his features. "Dean, I know I hurt you. I know I should have found a way to contact you sooner, emergency or not. But Laura, I need you to know that leaving you that morning was the hardest thing I've ever had to do." Dean moved closer, slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "And every day this week, while I was sitting in that hospital, all I could think about was how badly I wanted to call you, to hear your voice, to know that when this was all over, I could come home to you." "Come home to me?" Laura's heart skipped at the words. "To whatever this is between us, to the possibility of us." Dean stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his green eyes. "Laura, I'm falling in love with you. I might already be there, and the thought that I might have lost you because of terrible timing and miscommunication is killing me." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and completely unexpected. Laura felt tears spring to her eyes, not of hurt this time, but of something that felt dangerously like hope. "Dean," she began, but he held up a hand. "Before you say anything, I need to show you something else." He moved to the bedroom, returning a moment later with something folded carefully in his hands. "I found this on the bed when I got home tonight." It was his white dress shirt, the one Laura had worn that night, the one she'd folded so carefully before leaving. But Dean had done something to it. Where she'd left it neatly folded, he'd laid it out on the bed as if someone was still wearing it. The arms spread wide, the collar turned up slightly. "I kept it exactly like this all week," Dean said quietly. "I know it sounds crazy, but it still smelled like you, and it was the only thing that made the apartment feel like home." Laura's breath caught. "You kept it on the bed?" "I slept on the couch. I couldn't bear to disturb it. It was like having a piece of you here with me." Dean set the shirt down gently on the kitchen island between them. "Laura, I know I messed this up. I know I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I'm asking you to give me another chance. Give us another chance." Laura stared down at the white shirt, remembering how safe and cherished she'd felt wearing it that night. Then she looked up at Dean, at this man who'd kept her presence alive in his space even when she wasn't there, who'd just confessed to falling in love with her while his world was falling apart. "Your father," she said suddenly. "Is he really okay?" Dean nodded. "He's going to be fine. Full recovery expected. He's actually the one who told me I was an idiot for not finding a way to call you sooner." Despite everything, Laura felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "He said that?" He said, and I quote, "Son, if you found a woman worth leaving the hospital for, she's worth fighting for." Dean's own smile was tentative but genuine. "He wants to meet you, actually, when he's feeling better." "He wants to meet me? I may have mentioned you several times, possibly to the point where he was threatening to call you himself if I didn't stop being a coward." Laura laughed, and the sound surprised her. After a week of feeling hollow and hurt, laughter felt foreign and wonderful. "You told him about me?" "I told him I'd met someone who made me want to be better than I am. Someone who looked at the spaces I lived in and saw how to make them feel like home. Someone who made me remember what it felt like to want something more than just success." Dean took a step closer. "Someone I was terrified of losing." Laura felt the last of her defenses crumble. Looking at Dean now, exhausted, honest, vulnerable, she could see the truth of everything he was saying. This wasn't the polished businessman she'd first met, or even the charming man who'd seduced her with wine and sunsets. This was just Dean, raw and real, and asking for forgiveness. "I was so scared," she admitted quietly. "When I woke up and you were gone, it felt like Stephen all over again, like I'd been stupid enough to believe someone could actually want me." "Laura?" Dean moved close enough to touch her face gently. "I more than want you. I need you. This week without you has been torture, not just because of Dad, but because I kept wanting to share every moment with you. The good news, the scary news, the middle-of-the-night panic attacks, I wanted you there for all of it." "Dean, I know it's too soon to say this. I know we've only had one real date, and it ended in disaster. But Laura, I love you. I love your laugh and your stubbornness, and the way you make everything around you more beautiful. I love that you talk to your plants, and that you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it." Laura felt tears spill over, but for the first time in a week they were tears of relief rather than pain. "I love you too," she whispered. Dean's face transformed with joy and relief. "You do?" "I do. God help me, I fell for you months ago, and I've been fighting it ever since." Laura reached up to touch his face. "I love you, Dean Norris. Even when you make me crazy with worry and break my heart and put it back together again, all in the same conversation." Dean pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she was something precious and fragile and irreplaceable. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm so sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't trust you," Laura murmured against his chest. "I'm sorry I let fear make my decisions." "We're going to be okay," Dean said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're going to figure this out together." Laura pulled back to look at him, seeing nothing but love and certainty in his expression. "Together, together, if you'll have me. If you're willing to take a chance on us." Laura thought about her grandmother's words about beautiful things being worth the risk, about courage wearing the disguise of fear. Looking at Dean now, she realized that sometimes the biggest risk wasn't opening your heart. It was keeping it closed. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to everything." And when Dean kissed her then, Laura knew that this time, when morning came, neither of them would be facing it alone. The most beautiful endings are really just the beginning of something extraordinary. 3 months later, Chicago was dressed in the golden hues of early autumn, and Laura Fraser had never been happier. The morning sun streamed through the windows of her Wicker Park apartment as she moved around her kitchen, humming softly while she made coffee for two. Dean's jacket hung over the back of her vintage dining chair, and his copy of the Wall Street Journal lay folded next to her sketchbook on the small table. They'd been spending more nights at her place lately. Dean claimed he loved the cozy intimacy of her apartment, the way every corner told a story about who she was. Laura suspected he also loved the way Ferdinand the ficus tree seemed to approve of him, its leaves perking up whenever Dean watered it during his morning routine. "You're humming again," Dean said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with sleep-tousled hair and wearing the Chicago Bears t-shirt Laura had bought him as a joke. It had become his favorite piece of sleepwear, much to her amusement. "I'm allowed to hum in my own kitchen," Laura replied, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him good morning. Even after 3 months, the simple gesture still sent warmth spreading through her chest. "I love your humming," Dean said, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I love everything about your mornings, the way you make coffee like it's a sacred ritual, the way you read the news on your phone and mutter commentary under your breath, the way you steal my t-shirts and pretend you don't know where yours went." Laura looked down at the soft grey shirt she was wearing. Definitely his. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Dean nuzzled her neck, making her laugh. "Speaking of clothes, I need to stop by the penthouse today to pick up some things. Want to come with me?" Laura hesitated. She'd been back to the penthouse several times since their reconciliation, but it still held complicated memories, Dean seemed to sense her reluctance. "Actually, I have something I want to show you there," he continued. "Something I've been working on." "What kind of something?" "The kind of something that requires your professional opinion." Dean's smile was mysterious. "Trust me." Laura studied his face, seeing something she couldn't quite identify in his expression. "Always." 2 hours later, they stood in front of Dean's building, and Laura felt the familiar flutter of nerves she always experienced here, but Dean's hand was warm and steady in hers, and when he squeezed gently, she felt grounded again. "Before we go up," Dean said, stopping her at the entrance, "I need to tell you something. You're making me nervous." Good nervous or bad nervous? Laura considered this. Dean had been acting slightly strange all morning. Not suspicious exactly, but like he was carrying a secret he was excited to share. "Good nervous, I think. Laura, these past 3 months have been the best of my life. Not just because of the big moments, but because of all the small ones. Sunday morning crossword puzzles, grocery shopping together, the way you reorganized my sock drawer because the chaos was personally offensive to you." Laura laughed. It really was offensive. Who organizes socks by color instead of function? Someone who needed you to come into his life and make everything better. Dean's expression grew more serious. "You've made me understand what home really means. It's not about the space or the view or the expensive furniture. It's about the person you want to share it all with." "Dean!" Laura's heart started beating faster, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. "Come on," he said, leading her toward the elevator. "I want to show you what I've been working on." The ride to the penthouse felt different this time. Dean seemed nervous but excited, and he kept checking his phone like he was timing something. When the elevator doors opened, Laura immediately noticed that something had changed. The apartment looked exactly the same, but it felt different. Warmer somehow, more lived in. And there were small touches that hadn't been there before. A throw pillow in Laura's favorite shade of deep teal, a small succulent on the kitchen counter, a framed photo of them from Simone's birthday party last month. "Dean, did you redecorate?" "Not exactly." Dean led her toward the bedroom, his hand slightly damp with what Laura realized was nervous perspiration. "I made some additions." He opened the bedroom door, and Laura's breath caught. The room looked mostly the same, but on the bed, carefully laid out exactly as it had been that morning 3 months ago, was his white dress shirt. But this time, there was something different about it. Laura moved closer and saw that there was a small velvet box resting where the heart would be. "Dean," her voice was barely a whisper. "I kept that shirt on the bed for a week after you left," Dean said quietly, moving to stand behind her. "And when we got back together, I couldn't bring myself to put it away. It became a symbol of something precious I almost lost." Laura turned to face him, her eyes wide. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to argue about sock organization, and listen to you sing in the shower and watch you turn every space we share into something that feels like home." Dean's voice was steady, but emotional. "I'm saying that I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." He reached for the small box on the shirt, and Laura's heart hammered against her ribs as he dropped to one knee beside the bed. "Laura Marie Fraser," Dean said, opening the box to reveal a stunning vintage engagement ring with an Art Deco setting that looked like it had been designed specifically for her. "You were the dream that turned into reality. Will you marry me?" Laura stared down at him, this man who'd learned to be vulnerable, who'd fought for their love, even when she'd been too scared to believe in it. The ring was perfect, elegant and unique, and nothing like the traditional solitaires she'd always imagined. It was distinctly her, which meant Dean had been paying attention to details she hadn't even known about herself. "You want to marry me?" she asked, her voice thick with tears. "I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to grow old with you and argue about interior design choices and spoil our children and travel the world and come home to each other every single night." "Children?" Laura's smile was tremulous and bright. "If you want them. If you want any of it. If you want me." Dean's voice cracked slightly. "Laura, I know we haven't been together very long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're my person. You're my home." Laura looked down at this incredible man who was offering her everything she'd never dared to dream of. She thought about her grandmother's words about beautiful things being worth the risk, about courage disguised as fear. But looking at Dean now, she didn't feel afraid. She felt sure. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes? Yes?" Laura laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, Dean Norris. Yes to everything." Dean's face broke into the most beautiful smile Laura had ever seen, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her hand. He stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the bedroom while she laughed and cried and held onto him like he was her anchor in the most wonderful storm. "I love you," she said against his lips when he finally set her down. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Don't be scared," Dean said, cupping her face in his hands. "We're going to have the most beautiful life together." Laura looked around the bedroom, at the white shirt that had caused so much pain and had now become the symbol of their future, at the ring sparkling on her finger, at the man who'd somehow convinced her that fairy tales could be real. "So you know what this means?" she said, grinning up at him. "What? I'm definitely going to have to redecorate this place. Again, our style, not just yours." Dean threw back his head and laughed. "Laura Fraser, soon to be Laura Norris, you can redecorate every single day for the rest of our lives if it makes you happy." "Just Laura Fraser Norris, actually," she corrected with a smile. "I'm keeping my name too." "Laura Fraser Norris," Dean repeated, like he was testing how it sounded. "Perfect. Just like you." As they stood there in the late afternoon light, surrounded by the promise of forever and the certainty of love, Laura realized that some stories really do have happy endings. Sometimes the prince isn't perfect, and the princess has trust issues, and the castle needs better decorating. But sometimes, if you're brave enough to believe in second chances and patient enough to let love grow, you get exactly the ending you never knew you wanted. And as Dean kissed her again, Laura knew that this wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the beginning of their most beautiful chapter yet. 2 years later, the morning sun painted golden stripes across the hardwood floors of the renovated penthouse, now transformed into something that was unmistakably theirs. Laura Fraser Norris stood at the kitchen island, wearing Dean's old white dress shirt, the same one from that fateful night, now soft and worn from countless washings and lazy Sunday mornings. Her wedding ring caught the light as she arranged fresh flowers in a vase, humming the same Nina Simone song her grandmother used to sing. The space around her told the story of two lives beautifully intertwined. Laura's colorful artwork hung beside Dean's black and white photography. Her vintage leather reading chair sat next to his modern desk. Ferdinand the ficus had been joined by an entire family of plants that thrived in the abundant light, creating a small indoor garden that made the expensive penthouse feel like a true home. "Mrs. Fraser Norris." Dean's voice was warm with amusement as he emerged from their bedroom, adjusting his tie. Even after 6 months of marriage, he still loved the way her new name sounded. "Mr. Norris," Laura replied with a smile, reaching up to straighten his collar. "You're going to be late for your meeting. Worth it to watch you arrange flowers in my shirt." Dean's arms circled her waist, pulling her closer. "You know, I have about 12 of those shirts now, but you always choose that one." "It's lucky," Laura said simply, leaning into his embrace. "It brought us together." "Actually, I think we brought us together. The shirt was just along for the ride." Laura laughed, the sound as bright and free as it had been on their wedding day 6 months ago. A small ceremony in her grandmother's old church, with Simone as maid of honor, and Dean's father walking Laura down the aisle after her own father had passed away years before. Dean's dad had recovered beautifully from his heart attack and had become one of Laura's biggest champions, often joking that his son had finally found someone who could manage both his stubbornness and his sock drawer. "I still can't believe we live here," Laura murmured, looking around the space that had once felt so intimidating and now felt like the safest place in the world. "We live wherever we're together," Dean said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "This is just the address." A soft knock at the door interrupted them, and they broke apart as Simone let herself in with the spare key they'd given her. She was carrying a bouquet of congratulations flowers and wearing scrubs from her night shift, her face bright with excitement. "Are you ready for this?" Simone asked, setting the flowers on the counter and pulling Laura into a hug. "As ready as I can be," Laura replied, though her voice carried a note of nervous anticipation. Today was the day Laura was officially launching her own interior design firm. After months of planning and preparation, she was leaving the security of her old job to build something entirely her own. Dean had been her biggest supporter, even offering to invest in the business, though Laura had insisted on doing it herself. She'd learned that accepting love didn't mean losing independence. It meant having someone believe in your dreams as much as you did. "The office space looks incredible," Simone continued. "I stopped by yesterday and honestly, it looks like something out of a magazine. Your first clients are going to lose their minds." "Speaking of first clients," Dean said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This came for you yesterday." Laura recognized the elegant stationery immediately. It was from Mrs. Williams, the furniture showroom owner she'd famously compared to a bag of lemons. Inside was a handwritten note requesting Laura's services for her own home, along with a recommendation from 3 of her wealthy friends. "She wants to hire me?" Laura asked, reading the note with amazement. "Apparently, she's been following your work," Dean said with a grin. "She said, and I quote, 'Anyone brave enough to tell me the truth about my attitude deserves to decorate my house.'" Laura burst into laughter, remembering that particular afternoon and how certain she'd been that she'd ruined everything. Now that moment of honesty was opening doors she'd never imagined. "You see," Simone said, squeezing Laura's hand, "sometimes the scary moments turn out to be the best ones." After Simone left for home and sleep, Laura and Dean stood together on the terrace where it all began. The city spread out below them, alive with morning energy and endless possibilities. Laura thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, careful, guarded, convinced that love was something that happened to other people. That woman could never have imagined standing here now, married to her dream man and about to launch her dream business. "Nervous?" Dean asked, noticing her quiet contemplation. "Terrified," Laura admitted, "but the good kind of terrified, the kind that means you're about to do something that matters." "You're going to be incredible," Dean said with absolute certainty. "You have a gift for making spaces feel like home, but more than that, you have a gift for making people feel seen and understood. That's what real design is about." Laura turned in his arms, studying the face she'd grown to love more each day. "How did you get so wise?" "I married a woman who teaches me new things about life every single day," Dean replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've made me braver, Laura. Before you, I was successful but not really alive. Now I wake up every morning excited about what we're going to discover together, even when I reorganize your entire closet without asking. Especially then, though I still think organizing by color makes more sense than your mysterious system." "It's not mysterious. It's functional," Laura protested, laughing. "Casual wear, business wear, special occasions. It's logical. To you, maybe. To the rest of the world, it's chaos disguised as order." They were still playfully arguing about closet organization when Dean's phone buzzed with a reminder about his meeting. As he gathered his things to leave, Laura watched him move through their space with the easy confidence of someone who was completely at home. He paused to water Ferdinand, straightened a throw pillow on the sofa, and grabbed the travel mug of coffee she'd prepared for him without being asked. "I love you," she called out as he headed for the elevator. "I love you too," Dean replied, blowing her a kiss. "And Laura, today is going to be amazing. I can feel it." After he left, Laura stood alone in their beautiful home, surrounded by the life they'd built together. She thought about her grandmother's words about beautiful things being worth the risk, about courage wearing the disguise of fear. She thought about the night she'd decided to stay for dinner with a mysterious client, and how that single act of bravery had led to everything she now held dear. Her phone buzzed with a text from her first appointment of the day, confirming their meeting and expressing excitement about working with her. Laura smiled, grabbed her portfolio and keys, and headed for the door. She had a business to launch and dreams to make real. But first, she paused at the bedroom doorway, looking at the bed where Dean's white dress shirt lay folded on his pillow, a small daily reminder of the love that had changed everything. Some people might think it was silly, keeping that shirt, turning it into a symbol of their story. But Laura had learned that love lived in the small gestures as much as the grand ones. She touched her wedding ring, took a deep breath and stepped into the elevator that would carry her down to street level and out into the world where her new life was waiting. As the doors closed, Laura Fraser Norris smiled. She was no longer afraid of heights. She was no longer afraid of falling, because she'd learned the most important truth of all. When you have the right person to catch you, falling feels exactly like flying. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks and fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the space between one breath and the next, in a glance across a room, in the decision to stay when everything inside you says to run. Sometimes love is just two people choosing each other, again and again, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. Laura and Dean's story reminds us that the most beautiful endings are really just beginnings in disguise. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the courage to let someone see who you really are. That home isn't a place you find. It's something you build together. One conversation, one laugh, one shared morning at a time. In a world that often tells us to guard our hearts and protect ourselves from disappointment, Laura chose to be brave enough to love again. She chose to trust that not all endings have to be painful, that not all risks lead to heartbreak, and that sometimes the scariest decision, opening your heart to someone new, can lead to the most beautiful chapter of your life. What would happen if you chose to be as brave as Laura? If you decided that your past disappointments don't have to write the script for your future? If you believed that you, too, deserve a love that makes falling feel like flying? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.